Ladies and gentlemen, there is a great deal of wisdom to be found in the observation that we live in a world not of perfect people, but of individuals, each carrying their own burdens, hopes, and flaws. Yet some individuals bring with them a particularly heavy weight, a toxic nature that can cast a shadow over even the most sunny of dispositions. Today I wish to speak to you about the nature of such individuals and offer practical guidance on how we might cope with their presence in our lives. Recognize the toxicity. Before we can deal with any problem, we must first recognize it. Toxicity comes in many forms, be it constant criticism, manipulation, dishonesty, or the ability to drain your energy and spirit. It is not always an easy thing to see, for often it is cloaked in seemingly innocent gestures or words. But understanding that these behaviors harm you is the first step toward dealing with them. Don't take it personally. One of the greatest traps that toxic people set for us is the trap of taking their words and actions personally. They may criticize, belittle, or ridicule you, and in those moments it feels as though their attacks are aimed directly at your very essence. Yet you must remind yourself these are reflections of their inner turmoil, not your worth. Their words are more about their inability to deal with their own struggles than about any failing of yours. Set boundaries. There is a profound necessity in the establishment of boundaries. Toxic people often lack the respect for personal space and limits, and they will push and test until they have worn you down. Be firm and clear in stating what you will not tolerate. If a person's actions are causing harm to you, it is your responsibility to protect your emotional well-being. Seek distance when necessary. At times, the best course of action is simply to step away. If you find that the toxicity of an individual is wearing on your spirit and affecting your peace, distance can serve as a powerful shield. This is not an act of hatred, but of self-preservation and necessary retreat for the preservation of your own mental and emotional health. Don't engage in their games. Toxic people often seek to draw you into their world of manipulation and negativity. They may provoke arguments, create chaos, or attempt to twist your words. It is vital to remain above the fray. Do not lower yourself to engage in their games. Instead, remain calm, composed, and unaffected by their provocations. To respond with empathy, not sympathy. It is easy to approach a toxic person with anger or bitterness, but this will only fuel the fire. Responding with empathy, acknowledging their pain without taking on their burdens, is the higher path. Understand that their actions often stem from unresolved wounds or fears, but do not mistake empathy for an invitation to tolerate mistreatment. Protect your inner peace. The pursuit of peace is not a passive act. It is an active commitment to safeguard your mental and emotional state from those who would seek to disturb it. Do not allow the negativity of others to disturb the sanctity of your own mind. Practice mindfulness, meditation, or whatever methods work best for you in maintaining a peaceful, calm demeanor. Be careful of self-sacrifice. Toxic individuals can often demand too much of your time, energy, and resources. They may seek to extract from you endlessly without ever reciprocating. Remember, self-sacrifice has its limits. Your first duty is to yourself and your own well-being. Do not become so enmeshed in their needs that you forget to care for your own. Don't try to fix them. Another mistake is the attempt to fix the toxic person. It is a noble impulse, perhaps, to want to help those who are lost or hurting. But you must recognize that you are not their savior. You are not responsible for their actions or their healing. Focus instead on maintaining your own strength and integrity. Seek support. Dealing with toxic people is not something to be done alone. Surround yourself with those who uplift and encourage you. Confide in trusted friends or family members who can offer perspective and remind you of your worth. A network of support can offer much-needed solace in times of emotional struggle. Accept that you cannot change them. We must accept that we cannot change other people. The toxic person you encounter may never see their own behavior or make the changes that you wish for them. Let go of the hope that you can fix them, and instead focus on how you can protect your own well-being in the face of their toxicity. Learn the power of forgiveness. While it may sound counterintuitive, forgiveness is a powerful tool in dealing with toxic people. Forgiveness does not mean excusing or tolerating their behavior, but it frees you from the shackles of resentment. By letting go of bitterness, you reclaim your own peace and release yourself from their hold. Live according to your values. Do not let the presence of toxic individuals lead you astray from your own values and beliefs. Continue to live in a manner that reflects your true self, not the distorted image that others may project onto you. Hold steadfast to your integrity and principles, and let them be the compass that guides you through the storms of negativity. Toxicity in individuals can take on many forms, yet it is often subtle, creeping into relationships and environments in ways that are not immediately obvious. The first step in effectively dealing with toxic people is to recognize their behavior and understand its impact on you and others around you. Toxicity is not always as overt as loud arguments or dramatic confrontations. It can manifest in quieter, more insidious ways, like manipulation, passive-aggressive behavior, or chronic negativity. These behaviors are designed to undermine, confuse, or control the emotions of those they target, often without the victim fully realizing the harm until it has already taken root. Recognizing toxicity requires a keen sense of self-awareness and a clear understanding of what healthy, respectful interactions look like. Healthy relationships are characterized by mutual respect, honesty, and a balance of give and take. In contrast, toxic relationships tend to be one-sided, where the toxic person demands more than they are willing to give. They may drain your emotional energy, leave you feeling anxious or inferior, or create an environment of constant conflict. Toxic people often thrive on manipulation, using guilt, shame, or emotional appeals to bend others to their will. Their behavior can cause you to question your own judgment, making you feel responsible for their emotions or actions. This manipulation can be difficult to pinpoint at first, because it is often disguised as care, concern, or helpfulness. One common manifestation of toxicity is the presence of constant negativity. A toxic person may consistently focus on the flaws and failures of others, speaking in a way that casts doubt on the potential of those around them. This negativity can create a pervasive sense of unease, as if nothing is ever good enough, and no one can ever meet their expectations. The constant barrage of criticism and pessimism chips away at your confidence, leaving you unsure of yourself and your abilities. Over time, this can lead to feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt, as the toxic individual's opinions start to feel like undeniable truths. Another common tactic used by toxic people is gaslighting, a form of psychological manipulation in which they make you question your own reality. They may deny facts, distort events, or twist your words to make you feel confused or even guilty for things that aren't your fault. Gaslighting is particularly harmful because it undermines your ability to trust your own perceptions, often leaving you feeling helpless and unsure of what is true. A toxic person may act in ways that are cruel or hurtful, only to later deny their actions or insist that you are overreacting. This creates a sense of doubt and self-blame, making it difficult to defend yourself without appearing unreasonable or irrational. Toxicity can also be expressed through emotional blackmail, a behavior in which the toxic person uses your emotions to manipulate or control you. This may involve threats, ultimatums, or playing on your feelings of guilt. They may make you feel as if you are responsible for their emotional well-being, leading you to take on more than you can bear. For example, they might say, "If you really cared about me, you'd do this for me, or I can't live without you." These statements create a sense of pressure and obligation, making you feel responsible for their happiness or stability. In reality, this is an unhealthy dynamic, as no one should be expected to sacrifice their own well-being for the sake of someone else's emotional needs. Toxic people may also refuse to take responsibility for their actions, constantly blaming others for their own mistakes or shortcomings. This lack of accountability can be frustrating, as it places the blame for their problems on everyone else, while they remain free from any sense of responsibility. They may also show a lack of empathy, dismissing or belittling the emotions and experiences of others. This inability to see the world from anyone else's perspective can make interactions with them feel dismissive or demeaning. The toxic person's self-centeredness creates an environment in which others' needs and feelings are constantly disregarded, leading to feelings of alienation and frustration. Understanding these signs of toxicity is crucial because they allow you to assess whether you are dealing with a toxic individual or simply someone going through a difficult time. People who exhibit toxic behaviors often lack the ability or willingness to reflect on their actions and the impact they have on others. They may justify their behavior with excuses, such as "I'm just being honest" or "I'm only looking out for you," without recognizing that honesty or concern can be expressed in ways that are respectful and constructive. In this way, toxicity often masks itself as concern, control, or criticism disguised as help. Once you have identified the toxic behaviors, it becomes easier to determine the best course of action in dealing with them. However, recognizing toxicity is only the first step. It is essential to understand that these behaviors are harmful not only to the person exhibiting them, but also to everyone they interact with. Recognizing the toll toxic people take on your emotional and mental health is an important realization, as it empowers you to make decisions that protect your well-being and maintain healthier boundaries. One of the most challenging aspects of dealing with toxic individuals is the tendency to internalize their behavior and take their actions personally. Toxic people often use criticism, manipulation, or passive-aggressive tactics to undermine those around them, making it easy for the recipient of such behavior to feel as though they are the problem. The second key point in dealing with toxic people is to not take their behavior personally. This is not an easy task, especially when their words or actions are aimed directly at you or affect you in a significant way. However, it is an essential skill to develop in order to protect your emotional and mental well-being. Taking toxic people's behavior personally is a natural impulse because we are wired to care about the opinions and actions of those around us. When someone lashes out or criticizes us, it feels like an attack on our character or worth. However, the reality is that their behavior is often a reflection of their own struggles, insecurities, or unresolved issues, rather than a commentary on who we are as individuals. By internalizing their negativity, we risk allowing their toxic patterns to define our self-worth. It becomes easy to spiral into self-doubt, believing that their criticisms are valid or that we are somehow deserving of their mistreatment. This is where emotional resilience comes into play. To avoid taking their behavior personally, it is essential to adopt the mindset that their toxicity is not about you. This does not mean excusing their behavior, but rather recognizing that their actions are an expression of their own emotional state and not a reflection of who you are as a person. Toxic individuals often project their frustrations, disappointments, or insecurities onto others in an attempt to regain control or feel better about themselves. This projection has little to do with you, even though it may feel deeply personal. By reminding yourself that their behavior stems from their own internal turmoil, you can start to detach emotionally from their actions. One of the ways to maintain this perspective is to take a step back and view the situation objectively. When confronted with a toxic individual, it can be helpful to pause and ask yourself what might be causing this person to act this way. In many cases, their behavior is rooted in their own unresolved issues, fears, or past traumas. Perhaps they are insecure about their own abilities, struggling with personal relationships, or dealing with stress or anger they cannot express healthily. Their toxicity is often a defense mechanism, an attempt to deflect attention from their own vulnerabilities by attacking or belittling others. Recognizing this can help you separate their behavior from your own identity. Toxic people often lack self-awareness, which is why they fail to see the impact of their actions on others. When someone engages in manipulative or hurtful behavior, it is because they are operating from a place of selfishness or emotional immaturity. They may not even recognize the harm they are causing or may justify their actions by believing they are just being honest, or telling it like it is. This lack of self-awareness can make their behavior feel even more personal, as though they are deliberately targeting you. However, this mindset shift that their actions are not a personal attack but rather an expression of their own internal struggles can help diminish the emotional weight of their words or actions. Another important aspect of not taking their behavior personally is setting emotional boundaries. Emotional boundaries allow you to protect your own mental and emotional health by preventing the toxic person's negativity from penetrating your inner world. When you set emotional boundaries, you acknowledge that their behavior belongs to them, not to you. You can still feel empathy for their struggles, but you do not allow their negativity or hostility to affect your sense of self. For example, if a toxic person criticizes you, rather than internalizing the criticism, you can simply acknowledge that it is their opinion, not a fact, and choose not to let it affect your self-esteem. A critical aspect of faith is its ability to foster inner resilience. Resilience is not simply about bouncing back from adversity, but about adapting, learning, and growing in the face of challenges. Faith instills in us a deeper belief in our own capacity for resilience. When we trust that we are part of a larger design or that there is inherent meaning in our struggles, we are less likely to succumb to feelings of helplessness. Instead, faith gives us the courage to face each day, to take small steps forward, and to build the resilience required to overcome whatever challenges lie ahead. Learning to disassociate from toxic people's behavior requires cultivating emotional resilience. This means strengthening your ability to bounce back from hurtful encounters and maintaining your sense of self-worth despite external criticism. Building emotional resilience involves practicing self-compassion and reminding yourself that you are worthy of respect and kindness, regardless of how others may treat you. It also involves developing a strong sense of your own values and beliefs, which can act as an anchor when faced with toxic interactions. When you know who you are and what you stand for, the harsh words or actions of a toxic person become less influential. Sometimes, toxic people may not only criticize you but also make you feel responsible for their emotions. They may say things like, "You made me angry," or "If you cared more about me, you'd do what I want." This emotional manipulation can be confusing, as it implies that their emotional state is directly tied to your behavior. However, this is a form of control, and it is crucial to recognize that no one else has the right to dictate your emotional responses. While we all have a role in the way others feel, we are not responsible for managing their emotions. By recognizing that their emotional reactions are their own responsibility, you can stop internalizing their reactions and stop shouldering the emotional burden of their behavior. A key practice in not taking toxic people's behavior personally is learning how to let go of the need for validation from others. Many toxic individuals rely on manipulation to gain a sense of control over others, often by making you question your own actions or motives. They might belittle your achievements or dismiss your feelings, making you crave their approval or validation. However, if you are able to detach from the need for their approval, you can break free from the toxic cycle. Instead of seeking their validation, focus on your own internal sense of worth and self-assurance. This shift in mindset helps you maintain emotional independence, ensuring that their toxicity has no power over your self-esteem. Setting boundaries is one of the most effective ways to protect your emotional well-being when dealing with toxic individuals. Toxic people often lack respect for personal space emotionally, mentally, and sometimes even physically, and will push against any limits you set. This disregard for boundaries can be exhausting, frustrating, and overwhelming. Without clear boundaries, the toxic individual may attempt to control or manipulate you, taking advantage of your willingness to tolerate their behavior. By establishing boundaries, you not only protect yourself, but also communicate to others what behaviors are acceptable and what are not. This can help to prevent future harm and allow you to maintain healthier relationships. The first step in setting boundaries is recognizing your personal limits. This requires self-awareness and an understanding of your own values, needs, and emotional triggers. Boundaries are not one size fits all, and what works for one person may not work for another. For example, you may have a low tolerance for criticism or manipulation, while someone else may be more accepting of certain behaviors. Understanding your emotional landscape allows you to pinpoint what types of interactions drain you or make you uncomfortable. It's also important to recognize that you are not responsible for other people's emotions, and you should not feel guilty for protecting your emotional and mental health. Toxic individuals often try to make you feel selfish or unreasonable for setting limits, but it is essential to remember that boundaries are a healthy and necessary part of any relationship. Once you've identified your emotional limits, the next step is to communicate your boundaries clearly and assertively. Toxic people often rely on ambiguity or indecisiveness to maintain control over others. When you fail to communicate your boundaries, they may take advantage of your reluctance to speak up, pushing you further into a corner. Being direct about your needs and limits prevents misunderstandings and reduces the likelihood of the toxic person testing your boundaries. For instance, if someone continually interrupts you during conversations, you might say, "I need to finish my point before you speak. It's important for me to be heard." This kind of clear, firm communication sets the tone for the conversation and establishes the expectation that your boundaries will be respected. Setting boundaries also means being willing to enforce them consistently. Toxic people will often test boundaries to see how far they can push before you relent. If you set a limit but don't follow through when it is violated, you send the message that your boundaries are negotiable. For example, if you tell a toxic person that you will not tolerate being yelled at, but you allow them to continue raising their voice without consequence, you reinforce the idea that your boundaries are flexible. Consistency is key. Every time a boundary is crossed, you must respond appropriately and uphold your limits. This could mean walking away from a conversation, taking a break from the relationship, or setting stricter limits for future interactions. The more consistent you are in enforcing boundaries, the less likely the toxic person will be able to manipulate you. It is also important to recognize that setting boundaries does not mean you have to be rude or harsh. Boundaries are not about punishment or control, they are about self-care and self-respect. You can set limits in a calm, respectful way while still being firm. For example, if a toxic person regularly invades your personal time or space, you can say, "I value my time alone to recharge, and I need you to respect that. I won't be available during these hours." The tone of your communication should reflect the nature of your relationship with the person. While it's crucial to be assertive, it's equally important to avoid escalating the situation unnecessarily. When setting boundaries, you should remain calm and composed, avoiding anger or frustration, as these emotions can be used by the toxic person to manipulate the situation. Toxic people may react negatively to your boundaries. They may attempt to guilt trip you, criticize you, or manipulate you into changing your stance. This is where emotional resilience comes into play. When faced with such reactions, it is essential to stay grounded in your own needs and avoid getting sucked into their emotional turmoil. Remember that their response to your boundaries is not your responsibility. They may react with anger or resentment, but that is their issue, not yours. In these situations, it is crucial to maintain your position and not back down in the face of manipulation or emotional pressure. If the person continues to push against your boundaries, you may need to reevaluate the relationship and consider whether it is worth maintaining in the long run. Another aspect of boundary setting is understanding that boundaries may need to be adjusted over time. As circumstances change, your emotional needs may evolve, and it's important to be flexible in reassessing your boundaries. For example, a toxic person who initially only made a passive comment may escalate their behavior over time, requiring you to set stricter boundaries. Conversely, if a person begins to show improvement in their behavior, you may find that you are comfortable relaxing certain boundaries. This fluidity does not mean that boundaries are any less important, it simply reflects the dynamic nature of relationships. In any case, regular check-ins with yourself and your emotional needs can help you maintain boundaries that align with your current life circumstances. It is also important to realize that not all boundaries need to be verbalized. Some boundaries are non-verbal, communicated through your actions or your choice to disengage from toxic interactions. For example, if someone is continuously being disrespectful or manipulative, you can set a boundary by physically removing yourself from the situation. If a toxic person constantly calls you with emotional demands, you may decide not to pick up the phone when they call. These actions send a clear message that their behavior is not acceptable, even if you do not need to engage in lengthy discussions or confrontations. Setting boundaries with toxic individuals is about respecting your own worth and demonstrating to others that you deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. Boundaries are not about controlling others, they are about taking control of your own life, emotions, and well-being. When you set boundaries, you establish a standard for how you expect to be treated and signal to others that you will not tolerate behavior that undermines your sense of self. This self-respect not only helps you maintain your emotional health, but also contributes to creating healthier relationships in the long run. By respecting your own boundaries, you create an environment where others are more likely to do the same.